So, to give you some context, my daughter and I were in a very severe car accident where we were T-boned at 90 miles an hour, spun in a complete circle, and then jumped over to face oncoming traffic. And the lady that hit us had reached over to grab some food, and she actually broke the rear axle on the tire of a Suburban truck. So it was an extremely hard hit. And unbeknownst to me and everybody else, I had a traumatic brain injury. I had dysautonomia. I felt like I was dying this one day and got rushed to the hospital. I had already been to this hospital about 40 times in a matter of 2 or 3 months, and nobody knew what was wrong with me. So every time I showed up at the emergency room, they didn't know what was wrong with me. They almost literally rolled their eyes at me and just got me out of there as fast as they could. I was fainting every time I stood up. I was severely bedridden. I was losing water, totally dehydrated all the time, and nobody knew why. So on this one occasion, about 3 months after the car accident, I was in the emergency room. They rolled their eyes at me again, but this time I don't know why, I showed up basically telling them that I felt like I was about to die. And that's like a weird presentation. Nobody ever says that. And I think they literally took me at my face value and thought that I was going to die in the emergency room. So much to my surprise, they took me upstairs, and I did a lot of ER as a doctor. So I kind of knew what they were supposed to be doing. They rolled me upstairs and put me in a room by myself with no monitors and no nurse. They just left me there alone. The next thing I remembered, there was a priest who walked into the room. He was wearing the black clergy wear with a white collar, and he was carrying a small glass jar that looked like it had oil in it. So he walked over to my bed to the right side of me. I saw that he had dipped his finger in the oil and started raising, he raised his hand to my forehead and he started to make the sign of the cross. I closed my eyes. And when I opened my eyes, I was going down a dark tunnel, and there were people laughing around me, and there were like big bubbles blowing forward down towards this tunnel. And it was as if and it was happy, and like we were going somewhere fun. And then the next thing I knew, there was a gigantic sun in front of me and slightly to my left, and it was God. It was his presence, and he was bounding like a pulsation in a very masculine tone that was like boom, boom, like a heartbeat. But it was extremely loving, no judgment, no sin, no bad things I ever did in my life. I wasn't a bad person. It was as if I was his child, and not only that, I was his favorite child. And there was nobody else in the entire universe but me and him, and I had 100% of his attention. And he loved me just the way I was. And I was floating in a silhouette of myself as if it was a spiritual body. Well, it was. My ankles were dangling towards outer space, like towards the bottom with no tone in them. My toes were pointed straight down. And same with my wrists. I didn't have any tone in them. And I remember God's light went and it hit my right leg. And then it went up my body to my head. And I remembered thinking, how did that happen when my left leg is closer to him? And how did that light like bend around my left leg to hit my right leg? And then almost at the same instant, I thought to myself, why am I questioning God? Like I shouldn't be so scientific, because he can do anything. So I wasn't in a normal place where normal rules, were beheld. So the other thing that I remember is I had no more tears. I knew 100%, like my body was fully saturated, like underwater, that I would never cry again for the rest of all eternity. I would never shed a tear. I would never be sad. I wouldn't know any sadness. I would only know joy. And anything that ever made me sad in the past would never make me sad again. And I would never have sorrow. In fact, I remember feeling that so distinctly and so thoroughly and so 100%, like that it saturated my being, like in suspended time almost. It was such a deep feeling. And then I thought at that same second, if only people on earth knew how I felt and what my level of joy was, they would not be crying for me. They would miss me in a human way, but they wouldn't be desperately sad. And they would be happy for me. They would be rejoicing if they just believed, if they knew. So that totally changed the way I felt about death that way, because I know what that feels like, and I feel that kind of joy for people that pass. Then God said to me, without any words, without spoken words, it was ESP. He said, "You can go up." I turned slightly to my right because he was off to my left, and there was like the stairway to heaven, just like all the pictures that people see. And I have a picture in a couple of my books. Very wide stairway at the bottom, completely white, big handrails on both sides, going up to a smaller and smaller, step. Then there was a gap of space where I could see the stars through there. And then there was a white cloud, big white cloud, bright cloud. So I followed God's directions and I floated to the right side. I didn't need to hold on to the railing. I floated up to the very top step, and then I hesitated. And he said, again by ESP, "You can go in." And I was confused because I wasn't sure if I wanted to go in, but I remember that I part of me wanted to go in, so much so that I noticed between the top step and the gap of space. And I was afraid that if I didn't jump up high enough into the cloud, that I would tip and somehow fall all the way into outer space. So I knew that I had to be careful about taking that jump up into the cloud. I hesitated, and then right then I saw my father running towards me inside the cloud. And he was pitched forward with his hands in motion, like he was running as fast as he could. And interestingly, I could also smell his scent. So I knew that it was him. And I knew he was waiting for me. I knew I would have great joy in there, but I wasn't ready. And then I turned to my right and I saw planet Earth far away in the distance. And I asked God, if I go in, will I be able to go back to my daughter? And he said, no, nobody goes in and can go back. Once you go in, you stay there. So I remember feeling very humble, very embarrassed, very ungrateful, because I didn't want to go in. I wasn't ready. I wanted to be with my daughter. She was only 2 years old. And she was like a chatterbox, and she was really beautiful. And like women in the grocery store would go home to their husbands and decide to have another baby girl. They wanted a girl. So she brought so many people into having, trying one more. I just wasn't ready to leave her. And I wanted to go back to Earth. And I felt at this point, the more I was thinking about going back and forth, and I knew I didn't want to go, but I was ashamed. I was very ashamed, and I started bargaining with God. And I said, can I please go back? Can you just take everything I ever did growing up, all the good things I did that I didn't have to do, and could you add them all up together to make it count, to be good enough to go back to her so I could watch her grow up? And then I felt even more ashamed, because of course he already knew everything. Like, why was I telling him? So I actually felt like crawling underneath a chair and hiding my shame and hiding myself from that shame. So I remember bending forward and closing my eyes and just kind of wrapping myself up into a little ball of shame. And then I waited for the next thing to happen. I didn't know what was going to happen next. So after a little time went by and nothing happened, I opened my eyes. And when I opened my eyes, the priest was taking his thumb off of my forehead. So I had that entire experience in maybe 15 seconds, 20 seconds, but it felt like half an hour. And I didn't get my healing for another 12 years that I spent in bed looking at the ceiling. I wrote 6 books, but I prayed a lot. I learned how to pray. I lived each day knowing that I could die. And I rose in the morning to the sound of the birds or the sun coming up and just thanked God that I lived another 12 hours overnight. And then when I woke up, I would ask God to just let me live until the sun went down. And when the sun went down, I would say, just be so grateful. Thank you, God. I lived through another day. I just have to keep doing this over and over and over again, no matter how long it takes. And I said to myself, if I'm gonna get up out of this bed, I'm gonna get out of this wheelchair, I'm gonna get out of this walker, I'm gonna get off the cane. And it took 12 years, but I saw myself walking. I saw myself talking. I couldn't even say the word "the" for a long time. I had to go through 6 cycles of speech therapy and watch what she did with her tongue and her lips and everything just to even say the word "the." And I ended up inheriting an entire medical practice, helping a lot of pain patients, one who had already committed suicide. And then over COVID, about 3 years or so, I saw about 2,500 patients and not one single one died. But I know that God brought me back for a reason. My daughter's now turning 21. She's a nursing assistant in nursing school. She saw her mom get raised from the dead, and she believes in miracles, and I believe in miracles. I am a miracle.